What if some of the most interesting plants for heart and circulatory wellness have been sitting in gardens this entire time? Not hidden in a lab, not locked behind a prescription counter, just growing quietly, in backyards, along fences, and sometimes even in places people call weeds. The surprising part is that many of these plants have been used across completely different cultures for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. And now, researchers are starting to study some of those same plants more closely. In today's video, we're looking at 10 garden plants that have become especially interesting in conversations around blood pressure, circulation, and overall heart wellness. Some of these are probably already familiar to you, but a few of them might completely change the way you look at your garden. One of them is considered a weed by most homeowners. Another has been part of traditional herbal drinks for generations, and one produces flowers so striking you'd grow it even if it had no wellness reputation at all. If you enjoy gardening, natural living, and learning the stories behind useful plants, subscribe to Backyard Wellness. All right, let's start with one of the oldest and most respected garden plants in the world. Plant 1. Garlic. Let's start with one almost everybody already has in their kitchen. Garlic. Not the powdered version sitting in the back of the spice cabinet. Fresh garlic. This plant has been part of traditional wellness practices for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians used it. Traditional Chinese medicine used it. Greek physicians wrote about it long before modern science existed. And today, researchers are still studying garlic for circulation, cardiovascular wellness, and overall heart health. What makes garlic especially interesting is a compound called allicin. But here's the part most people don't know. Allicin only forms when garlic is crushed or chopped. That sharp smell fresh garlic releases, that's part of the process happening, which is why fresh garlic tends to be very different from heavily processed versions. And honestly, garlic is one of the easiest plants you can grow at home. Plant a single clove in the fall, cover it with soil, and leave it alone through winter. By the following summer, that one clove usually turns into an entire bulb. There's something really satisfying about pulling garlic from the ground that you planted months earlier and using it in your own kitchen. Simple plant, long history, and still one of the most respected garden staples in the world. Plant 2. Hibiscus. If there's one plant on this list that instantly makes a garden feel alive, it's hibiscus. The flowers are impossible to miss. Deep reds, bright pinks, rich oranges. Even people who know nothing about gardening usually stop and look when hibiscus is blooming. But beyond the flowers, hibiscus has a very long history in traditional herbal drinks across different parts of the world. In West Africa, hibiscus drinks have been enjoyed for generations. In parts of the Caribbean and Latin America, it's commonly brewed into refreshing teas and cold drinks. In Egypt, hibiscus tea has been part of daily life for a very long time. Different cultures, same plant, and now, researchers have become interested in hibiscus because of the natural compounds found inside the petals, especially antioxidants called anthocyanins. What's interesting is how something so delicate-looking can also be such a resilient garden plant. Hibiscus loves sunlight and warmth. Once established, it produces flowers constantly through the season, sometimes for months at a time, and drying the petals is surprisingly simple. A lot of gardeners collect the flowers, let them dry naturally, and store them for tea later in the year. Honestly, even the process itself feels calming. There's something satisfying about making tea from flowers you grew yourself. Plant 3. Hawthorn. Hawthorn feels like one of those forgotten plants people used to know much more about. It grows as a thorny shrub or small tree with clusters of white flowers in spring and bright red berries later in the year. Most people probably drive past it without even noticing. But in traditional European herbal practices, hawthorn has been connected to heart and circulatory wellness for centuries. And what makes hawthorn interesting is how often it appears across completely different traditions. You'll find references to it in Old English herbal texts, European folk medicine, and even traditional practices outside Europe. That usually gets my attention whenever researching plants. When completely different cultures keep returning to the same plant over long periods of time, there's usually a reason. Hawthorn is also incredibly hardy. It tolerates poor soil, changing weather, and once established, it can live for decades with very little attention. In a way, it's the kind of plant that quietly takes care of itself, and maybe that's part of why people respected it for so long. Plant 4. Flaxseed. Flax has one of the oldest histories of any plant in this entire video. People were growing flax thousands of years ago for food, fabric, oil, and traditional wellness uses, long before modern agriculture looked the way it does now. And today, flaxseed is still being studied for things connected to heart health, circulation, and overall wellness. The seeds are rich in fiber, omega-3 fatty acids, and natural plant compounds called lignans. But what surprised me most while learning about flax wasn't even the research. It was the plant itself. Flax flowers are beautiful, tiny soft blue flowers that open in the morning light and move gently in the wind. If you plant enough of them together, it almost looks like a blue wave passing through the garden. And unlike a lot of wellness trends people spend money chasing, flax is actually simple. Grow it, harvest it, grind the seeds, add small amounts to meals. Nothing flashy about it, just a very old plant that people never really stopped using. Plant 5. Olive leaf. Most people think about olives for the oil, but historically, the leaves mattered too. In Mediterranean cultures, olive trees were connected to everyday life for generations. Food, cooking, trade, tradition, and herbal practices all tied back to the same tree. And honestly, olive trees have a certain presence to them. Twisted branches, silvery green leaves, slow growth. They look ancient even when they're young. Researchers studying olive leaves became interested in natural compounds like oleuropein, which has been explored for antioxidant and cardiovascular support. And while olive trees are strongly connected to Mediterranean climates, smaller varieties can actually grow surprisingly well in containers too. A lot of people keep them on patios, balconies, or sunny corners of the garden. There's also something symbolic about a tree that has represented peace, longevity, and resilience for thousands of years, still being valued today. Plant 6. Celery. Celery might be the least exciting-looking plant on this list, but sometimes the most ordinary plants end up being the most interesting. Researchers have looked at compounds in celery connected to blood vessel relaxation and circulation support, which is one reason the plant keeps appearing in wellness discussions. Traditional Chinese practices also use celery in ways connected to balance and circulation, long before modern studies existed. And honestly, celery deserves more credit as a garden plant. Fresh garden celery tastes completely different from the pale supermarket version most people are used to. It's stronger, more aromatic, and much more flavorful. It also grows well in raised beds and doesn't require a massive amount of space. And there's something nice about realizing that wellness plants don't always need to look exotic or rare. Sometimes, they're already sitting quietly in the garden the whole time. Plant 7. Dandelion. This might be the most underestimated plant in the entire video, because most people don't even see dandelion as a plant worth keeping around. They see a weed, something to spray, pull, get rid of. But for generations, dandelion was actually gathered intentionally for food and traditional herbal use. The leaves were eaten fresh, the roots were dried and roasted. The flowers were used in teas and homemade preparations. And honestly, once you start learning about dandelion, it changes the way you look at lawns completely. Researchers became interested in dandelion because of its natural nutrient content and traditional use connected to fluid balance and digestion. The leaves contain vitamins, minerals, and plant compounds that people valued long before modern nutrition labels existed. And one of the most interesting things about dandelion is how determined it is to grow. Cracks in sidewalks, empty lots, backyard corners, dry soil. It survives almost anywhere, which makes it kind of ironic that one of the most resilient plants in nature is also one of the most hated. Young leaves can be added to salads. Older leaves are often cooked, and the roots are commonly dried for teas or coffee alternatives. The entire plant gets used. And maybe that's part of why older traditions respected it so much. Plant 8. Beetroot. Beets have become incredibly popular in recent years, especially in conversations around athletic performance and circulation. And a lot of that attention comes from naturally occurring nitrates found inside the root. Researchers studying beetroot became interested in how those compounds interact with blood vessels and circulation in the body. But honestly, outside the science, beets are just one of the most satisfying crops to grow. You plant a small seed and a few weeks later, bright green leaves begin pushing through the soil. Then underneath, hidden from view the entire time, the root slowly develops. And when you finally pull one from the ground, it almost feels like uncovering something buried. Deep red, earthy, heavy, vibrant. Even the color alone makes beets feel unusually alive compared to most vegetables. They also grow relatively fast and do well during cooler seasons, which makes them a favorite for spring and fall gardens. And unlike many plants, beets give you 2 harvests. The roots are used in cooking, juices, and roasting. The greens can be sautéed or added to meals the same way people use spinach or chard. A simple crop with surprisingly deep roots in both gardening and wellness traditions. Plant 9. Turmeric. Turmeric doesn't look dramatic while it's growing. At first, it's just broad green leaves rising quietly from the soil. But underneath those leaves, bright golden rhizomes slowly develop underground. And for thousands of years, those golden roots have been part of cooking and traditional wellness practices across Asia. Today, turmeric is probably best known for conversations around inflammation and overall wellness support. Researchers continue studying curcumin, the main active compound in turmeric, because of its antioxidant properties and its connection to various areas of health research. But one thing I always find interesting about turmeric is how closely traditional preparation methods match what modern researchers later discovered. For generations, people combined turmeric with black pepper in food and drinks, without necessarily knowing the chemistry behind it. Later, researchers discovered that compounds in black pepper may help improve curcumin absorption. Sometimes, old traditions survive for a reason. Turmeric also grows surprisingly well in containers, especially in warm weather, and harvesting it feels completely different from harvesting most vegetables. You brush back the soil and suddenly, these bright orange-gold rhizomes appear underground, almost like hidden treasure. Plant 10. Passion flower. This is easily one of the most beautiful plants on the list. Passion flower almost doesn't look real when it blooms. Purple filaments, white petals. Intricate patterns that look almost geometric up close. It's the kind of flower people stop and stare at. And beyond the appearance, passion flower has a long history connected to relaxation and calming herbal traditions. Researchers studying the plant have explored compounds associated with relaxation, stress support, and nervous system balance, which honestly makes sense the moment you spend time around the plant itself. It has a calming presence to it. The vines climb slowly across fences and trellises, the flowers open dramatically, and the entire plant feels softer somehow compared to the others on this list. And I think that's an important reminder. A garden isn't only about food. Sometimes the value of a plant is the way it changes the atmosphere around you, the way it slows you down for a minute, the way caring for something living changes your relationship with your own environment. And maybe that's part of wellness too. One thing I noticed while researching this video is how often the same plants kept appearing across completely different cultures and time periods, different countries, different traditions, different generations, and yet people kept returning to many of the same garden plants over and over again. Garlic, hibiscus, hawthorn, flax, olive, dandelion, beetroot, turmeric. Plants that have stayed connected to people for centuries, not because they were trendy, but because they were useful. And I think there's something grounding about that, especially now when so much of modern life feels disconnected from nature completely. Growing even one useful plant changes the way you look at your garden. You stop seeing plants as decoration only. You start seeing them as part of a much older relationship between people and the natural world. So maybe after this video, you plant garlic, or make hibiscus tea, or stop pulling every dandelion out of the yard. Small things, but sometimes small habits are where bigger changes begin. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments which plant surprised you the most. And if you want more videos about gardening, traditional plant use, and natural wellness, subscribe to Backyard Wellness. Thanks for spending some time in the garden with me today. I'll see you in the next video.